The metal whip curled, smoking as Jack, the right-hand man of the Son of Heaven, stared down at Sen with murderous intent.
Answer my boss, Worm. Who sold you that beast soul?
Placing a hand on his freshly stinging skin, Sen glared at Jack. No one. I captured it myself. With a flash of his teeth, the shelter's dictator, Son of Heaven, snarled as he pulled the reins of his Triceratops beastman. The day I'd believe that ass freak can capture a beast on his own is the day that hell freezes over. Gritting his teeth, Sen stared at Son of Heaven. Then I guess hell's freezing over? Son of Heaven kicked Sen straight in the chest. Not wanting to let Son of Heaven catch on to his newfound power, Sen stumbled back as he feigned surprise. As he dropped the copper-toothed panther to sell the performance, the big cat hissed and spat as it hit the dirt. Like Sen, it also didn't appreciate being jumped onto the ground. Sliding off his Triceratops mount, Son of Heaven summoned his signature weapon, a sacred blood-red flaming sword. Looking at the malicious, flickering flames that soared out of its hilt, Sen had seen just what that infamous blade was capable of. Sharp enough to cut through a mutant beast, the sword could incinerate its victims before they even knew what happened. Instead of focusing on Sen, Son of Heaven placed his sword against the copper-toothed panther, letting the flaming blade hover above the bonded creature. Desperate to escape the heat, the panther snarled and wiggled as it tried to break free of its bonds. Seeing the struggling beast, Son of Heaven let out a cruel chuckle. It is a pitiful creature. Maybe Ass Freak is worthy of capturing something so weak. Behind Son of Heaven, the pack of goons laughed out loud. Even though Sen had never wronged Son of Heaven, the title of Ass Freak was well known throughout the shelter. When Sarah Arryn declared him an enemy of hers after stabbing her in the behind, it made him shunned by the entire shelter, regardless of what gang they came from. Reaching for the panther, Sen tried not to further provoke Son of Heaven. You're right, I got lucky with this one, so if you don't mind, I'd like to take it back with me. Jack cracked his steel whip again, striking Sen's hand before he could touch the bounded creature. Hissing from the sting of the pain, Sen waved his hand as he looked at the thrilled Jack. With a devilish smile, Jack cackled, Don't waste your time with this primitive buffoon. Why don't we just kill him for good? I bet getting rid of Ass Freak would do the whole shelter a service. Son of Heaven looked at Sen for a moment. Sen could see a flicker of fire as the brute debated on what to do with the Ass Freak before him. Out of everything in God's sanctuary, an easy target like the one before him was his favorite type of game. While beasts offered incredible rewards, squishing insignificant worms like Sen was what Son of Heaven did for fun in this lawless land. There was nothing more that Sen wanted to do than summon his golden armor and take a swing at Son of Heaven. However, he knew better than to strike the brute before him. While Sen was finally getting closer to understanding his true potential, Son of Heaven had months and years ahead of him. From what Sen had heard from the rumors, the warmongering was close to completing his sacred blood evolution. Unfortunately for Sen, enduring Son of Heaven's harassment was part of the game in God's sanctuary. Only the strongest can survive, and if I'm going to surpass Son of Heaven, I can't reveal all my cards just yet, Sen thought as he kept an eye on the flaming sword. If he were ever to find out that I have the black crystal, he'd be devising ways to get rid of me permanently. For now, I can't show that I'm a threat. After a long beat of contemplation, the brute smashed the butt of his sword down on Sen's hand. Just be thankful I'm letting you live today. However, if I hear that someone sold you that beast, despite Sarah Arryn's command, I'll personally cut you in half and stitch you to the shelter. Understood? Beside him, Jack snarled.
You're letting him go? That's ridiculous. This guy doesn't deserve your mercy.
Waving his hand, Son of Heaven climbed back onto his Triceratops mount. Didn't I tell you to keep quiet, Ballard? You know Sarah doesn't like others intervening with her business. As of now, the only person who deserves to decide his fate is Ms. Arryn.
But, sir...
I said shut up, Ballard. We've already wasted enough time here. If we're going to get to Sunset Slope before Deadly Fist, we need to go now. Let's not let this freak disrupt our hunt anymore. As Son of Heaven kicked his mount forward, his troops followed, all glaring at Sen as they passed. Following the group from behind on his wildebeest mount, Jack snarled before spitting at Sen.
You're lucky that the boss spared your life, ass freak. Someday you'll get what you deserve, and I'll make sure I'm on the other side of the blade.
When Son of Heaven's men were far enough away, Sen got up off the ground and brushed the dirt off his pants. While Sen was eager to try his hand against a brute like Son of Heaven, he knew better than to pick one too soon. Even if he was growing more powerful by the day, it would still be some time before he could actually take on Son of Heaven in a fight. Until then, Sen needed to stay low. Picking up the panther, Sen let out a sigh. I really hope whatever beast they're hunting escapes. I don't think I've ever seen someone who is less deserving of their power. Not interested in another scuffle, Sen headed straight to his room, stopping for nothing except to gather a new cage for the copper-toothed panther. After the primitive greenscale lizard had broken out of his cage, Sen made sure to find something even sturdier that couldn't easily be broken out of. After all, if this experiment with the copper-toothed panther worked out, he'd need to make sure that the cage could handle an even more powerful beast that he had planned on evolving. Now back in his room, the panther let out a muffled roar as Sen pushed it inside the cage. Just work with me here. In 2 seconds you can hate me as much as you want. Not interested in helping its captive, Sen struggled to place the dead weight into the cage. Once Sen could close the cage door behind the creature, he cut its bonds, freeing it from its shackles. Glaring at Sen through the bars, the panther licked its lips as if it was dreaming about devouring Sen. Reaching into his pocket, Sen pulled out the black crystal. All right, if you just eat this, that'll be the last thing I need from you. As soon as Sen placed the crystal in front of the beast, the panther licked it up as if it were a delicacy. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now let's get this show on the road. Unfortunately for Sen, that show wasn't moving very fast. Unlike his first experiment, the copper-toothed panther showed no signs of evolving, no matter how long Sen waited for the creature to evolve. For hours, he sat there staring at the cage as if he expected the panther to transform in the blink of an eye. Instead, the panther simply looked at him, licking its maw as it imagined just how tasty of a meal Sen would be. After 4 hours, Sen decided to hunt as he waited for the creature to evolve. This isn't like evolving an ordinary green-scale lizard. Evolving a primitive creature into a mutant one is going to take a lot longer than I would like. But Sen didn't want to wait. Evolving using only primitive genopoints was possible, but Sen wanted more. If he was going to be the strongest in God's sanctuary, he needed to evolve with not only 100 mutant genopoints, but also 100 sacred blood genopoints. The sooner he could evolve a creature, the closer he'd be to becoming an evolver and to becoming the strongest warrior in God's sanctuary. It meant that Sen would have an even easier time knocking the smug grin off of Son of Heaven and his right-hand man. Seeing that he wouldn't get any mutant genopoints today, Sen prepared his bag to go on another hunt in God's sanctuary once again. I need to put everything I can into hunting for more genopoints and more beast souls. If I'm going to show up Son of Heaven someday, I need a whole arsenal of tools at my disposal. But as he exited the room and stepped into the plaza, Sen found a creeping sense that something was off. To his surprise, as he looked around, he found that there wasn't a single person out in the plaza. The normally bustling center sat empty as vendors and homes all remained closed to the public. Normally for Sen, this would have been his dream. Most often he preferred to be left alone by people and enjoyed his alone time. But this time, Sen couldn't help but feel frustrated. If everyone was gone, something must be happening. Something that Sen didn't know about. Information was key to this land, meaning those who weren't in the know were left behind in the dust. And that's why he had to be smarter, craftier, and quicker than everyone else to get ahead. Where is everyone? Sen wondered. Did something pull them away? In the midst of the silence, Sen was surprised to hear the bang of a door, followed by the sound of someone shuffling their feet. Turning around the corner, Tobias hurried for the main gate as he struggled to carry an alloy bow and shield in his hand. Muttering to himself, Tobias kept his head down, unaware of anyone else in the shelter. Sarah Aron's going to be furious. It took way longer to bring back that primitive lightning mantis meat than I expected. I can't believe I didn't think about transportation before I made that deal with Dola. Hey, hold up, can I ask you something? Sen asked as he jogged over to Tobias. Immediately, Tobias recoiled as he looked at Sen. Unaware that it was the great dollar standing before him, Tobias only recognized Sen as Ass Freak, the town pariah who was interacting with could spell social suicide. Trying not to ruin his chances in the steel armor shelter, Tobias hurried even faster for the gate. With his strength from his newly acquired Geno points, Sen had no problem catching up with Tobias. Did you hear me? I wanted to talk to you for a moment. Don't worry, it's just the two of us. No one is going to see you talking to Ass Freak. Looking around, Tobias saw that Sen was right. The entire plaza was completely empty. With no one else watching, he decided it was safe to speak. I'm sorry, but I'm in a big rush. I can't really stop to talk. Sen shook his head. I just want to know where everyone is. Just where is everyone? Seriously? Have you been living under a rock as, Tobias stopped himself. While he knew of Sen's cruel nickname, he knew Sen probably wouldn't appreciate it coming out of his mouth. Sen shook his head. You'll have to forgive me. It's hard to get information as Ass Freak. Tobias blushed. Yeah, sorry. But they're all at a battle. Someone found a sacred blood creature close to the steel armor shelter, and all of the major gangs have been grouped up at Sunset Slope to take it down. A sacred blood creature? Sen asked, his mind racing as he wondered how long it would take him to get to the mountain. If there really was a sacred blood creature, that's surely where Son of Heaven and his men were off to. A sacred blood creature that required the entire shelter to bring it down meant it was worth hunting. If Son of Heaven and his gang were heading there, it would be something certainly worth stealing, and that's precisely what Sen would do.